You know what? I've just been muted that whole time. I've just done my full intro, just welcomed everyone. The one thing I said was just the stress of doing a LinkedIn Live at the same time as a Zoom. So good morning. Sorry to everyone for not having the audio. I'm even going to put that in the comments. What started without the... You know what? Audio. I've just been... And I think we're going to have a good show today. Today's all about getting started and employing people with criminal convictions. Welcome to our guests who are tuning in on Zoom. You are our special guests. You get access to asking questions and doing polls in the chat, as well as a certificate at the end of this to say that you've attended the Zoom event. To all of you watching on LinkedIn, please put your comments on the LinkedIn post. Can't hear you, that's better. Thank you, Richard. Good morning. This is an event all around supporting employers how to employ people with criminal convictions. If you're in the Zoom, welcome. Pop questions in the chat. Let me know who you are in the chat. I would love to hear that. And if you're on LinkedIn, put your questions in the comments and let me know if you are tuning in, where you're tuning in from in the world in the comments. I would love to hear it, and give the post a like on LinkedIn. It helps boost our message to support more employers to employ people with criminal convictions. How's the audio, Richard, in your comments? Can you hear the background noise, the royalty paid music in the background? Does it serve you well? Does it serve our guest online, Laura? Is the background noise too much, or is it okay for you? Let's have a check. I don't even know where my chat is. There it is. Well, let's get started with today's event. This is all around how you as an employer can get started in employing people with criminal convictions. We specialise in supporting UK employers curious to learn about employing people with convictions. They might need to overcome some legal and compliance challenges. They might want to boost their recruitment or their retention. They might even just need to demonstrate impact and win more bids. That's exactly what employing people with convictions gets you. And today we're going to support you to feel more confident employing people with convictions. Everyone is auto muted, and the runtime is always 60 minutes. We finish on time every time. So this is for you to keep on time. Laura's saying all good over there. Laura, I've realised I've got a Laura tuning in on LinkedIn, and I've also got one on Zoom. And I was talking to the Zoom one, but the LinkedIn one replied. So LinkedIn, Laura, you're winning at the moment. Thanks, Laura. Good morning. Sorry, Laura on Zoom. That's really mean. You're winning too. These slides are sent out to all our Zoom registrants and Zoom participants afterwards. If you'd like a copy of the slides and you're looking on LinkedIn, just pop me a message in the comments and I'll get that over to you. But let me tell you a tiny bit about myself whilst I share with our LinkedIn audience a quick poll around their perceptions on employing people with criminal convictions. So I'm just going to launch my Zoom poll perceptions, employees perceptions. There we go. That's there for our Zoom audience to check in. 10 years ago, I started Offploy. I am the son of 2 police officers. After my business failed, a camping business, I know, fun, right? Camping. After the camping business failed, whilst at university, having won awards from Richard Branson and secured £300,000 investment, ultimately, it all got lost. The business did not go as well as I expected it to. It all failed, and I made a stupid and regretful decision to get involved with drugs, and that landed me a 28-month prison sentence. And it was whilst in prison, where I expected to find horrible, evil, nasty people, I mainly found desperate people. I'm not making any excuses for crime. I'm just saying what I found, and I found people who were there as a result of substance misuse or substance addiction. I was there with people as a result of abuse, of domestic violence, of people with all sorts of challenges in life. Some naughty people, I understand that, I do appreciate that. But the majority, I felt, the biggest barriers in life was what people thought of them and ultimately what they thought of themselves. And this is why I started Offploy. So 10 years ago, started this organization to mentor and support people with convictions. We've since expanded as a service, and for every 100 people we support, there are 55 fewer offences committed in the UK. We mentor over 1,000 people a year, and since starting have supported over 5,000 socially excluded individuals. 70% of our team have lived experience of the criminal justice system, and we generate millions a year in savings for society. That number is accredited, it is well represented on our social return on investment. And this number here It's a little bit out of date. We've just got a more recent number. It has gone up, I'll tell you that much. But it's not accredited yet. So when it's accredited, we'll be publishing it, hopefully in time for our proper 10th birthday, which would technically be, gosh, we incorporated on the 28th of May, 2016. I can't believe we are like literally away 10 years, like 10 years away from being released from prison, from finding an investor, from someone believing in me, to going on and supporting this service, which has seen over 5,000 people come through the work we do. One side of what we do supports employers to employ people with convictions. This is what today's webinar is about. And the other side of what we do supports the government, social organisations and socially excluded people to essentially take those with criminal convictions or those at risk of offending and help them access greater opportunities in life. Because our vision is a world where every person is safe from crime. And we support people through mentoring, advice and guidance, improving their knowledge, attitudes and behaviours, as well as looking at all areas of life, from housing, from substance misuse to mental health challenges, whatever it might be, supporting individuals in the right direction to support them to move forward in life. It's super exciting. We love the work we do, and you'll see from our team and our colleagues that they've all got some form of relationship with the criminal justice sector or know someone who has. So I think that's really powerful as a way to do this service. But let's get into it. Let's first of all define what we mean when we hear the word ex-offender or prisoner. I mean, before I went to prison, it was always this guy, right? We always thought this guy. We always think Shawshank Redemption, Prison Break, Orange is the New Black. Maybe for some of our, I don't want to say older audience, that's not fair, Porridge. There's all sorts of shows out there that give this idea that this is what a prisoner or a person with a criminal conviction looks like. This was certainly my perception before going to prison. But if you want to put it in the comments and put it in the chats, if you're on LinkedIn, put it in the comments. If you're on Zoom, throw it in the chat. For every 10 people that the judge sentences, in the UK, how many go to prison? The rest will get community-based sentences. The rest will get fines, restraining orders, community service. How many go to prison out of 10? Throw your answers in the chat and throw your answers in the comments on LinkedIn. We're getting there. We're getting there. Sam wants the slides. Sam will get you those slides. Don't you worry about it, Sam. So, how are we getting on? How many out of 10? Wrong answers only, please. When the judge sentences people in the UK, only 1 in 10 go to prison. 1 in 10. 9 people get community-based sentences and may never see the inside of a prison cell. That really blew my mind, that statistic, that number. That I think we always think ex-offenders and people with criminal convictions have all been to prison. Whereas of those sentenced, only 1 in 10 go to prison. And when we look at driving-related offences, they represent, excuse me, I'm throwing my slides everywhere, driving-related offences represent over 50% of convictions. So when we think about people with criminal convictions, we might always think of prisoners, we might always think violence, harm, it could be driving-related offences. So it really does start to change our perception over how many million people have a criminal record. Well, on the police national computer, there is over 13 million people with a criminal record. So that really does put into perspective on what a person with a criminal record is. And last question for our Zoom audience, because our LinkedIn, look at Sam. Sam knew the answer. Well done, Sam. When we look at the number of the UK's working age population, 1 in how many have a criminal conviction? 1 in how many? So when an employer has applicants applying to their roles, 1 in how many have a criminal conviction? Any answers? Any thoughts from our chat online? One in how many? And there's a minor delay on LinkedIn, so I'm giving people way more time today than I usually do. Well, 1 in 4. 1 in 4 adults of the UK's working age population has a criminal conviction. So 1 in 4 of the people you're supporting, 1 in 4 of the people applying for your roles. And if your company doesn't do criminal records checks or doesn't ask the question, Probably 1 in 4 of your colleagues has a criminal conviction too. And maybe some of them look like this guy, but probably not all of them. And that's exactly the point here, that when we think about people with criminal convictions, we really need to change those perceptions that we don't all have distinguishing marks. We don't all have the tattooed knuckles with love and hate. We're not all pulled straight from a Hollywood film on what it is to be a person with a criminal conviction. The hearts part is easy. This is all around, hey, people can make mistakes. People have criminal convictions. People might have done something wrong. People might have done something terrible, but they might have served a punishment and they might want to move forward in life. There is stories. There's my story. There's the story of people that you will know that could convince you under circumstances that maybe you could also end up with a criminal conviction. The hearts part is easy. That's what I say. Like when you're convincing your board, when you're convincing people to employ people with convictions, everyone can relate that maybe they've been in a situation in life that could have landed them with a criminal conviction. I hear a lot of people say, there for the grace of God go but I, or something there, but something along those lines. You know what I'm saying. But the minds part, so let's say people, okay, generally I'm convinced. Generally I'm willing to employ people with convictions. But it's not going to stick. I need a business case. I need a good reason. I need logic. I can't just rule my business with emotion. This is where we need to have the logic part. And this is how the brain works. The brain actually decides based on the heart, based on what it wants, and it decides this would be a good thing to do. I like to do this. I want to be seen to be doing this. I want to support people. I want to give people another chance. All these reasons there, those internal reasons. And you'll be feeling it. Your board will be feeling it. Your line manager will be feeling it. But we need some justifications. We need some hard facts. We need numbers that can help us say, right, this is why it's a good business choice to do that. And there are 3 clear business reasons on why you would start exploring and get it right when it comes to employing people with convictions. The first is legal and compliance. If you ask the question around criminal convictions, you have certain duties to fulfill under the Information Commissioner's Office, the ICO, and under the Rehabilitation of Offenders Act. Most people get this wrong. Only 16% of companies who ask questions, for example, have a criminal records policy. You need a criminal records policy to process criminal record data. That includes asking people if they have any unspent convictions. Even the way you ask the question has legal grounding. That needs to be done correctly, and you ask the question differently based on the type of role you're recruiting for. You don't want to get this wrong because this can result in fines and even prosecution. Fines equivalent to 4% of your revenue. What's your company's revenue? Let's have a think about that. Now try and work out 4%. I'm not a mathematician. My colleague Richard is. He's very good with his numbers and economics, and he's on the chat. He can figure it all out, but our organisation does over $1 million. That means even we would be facing 40 grand's worth of fines if we get this wrong. That would literally cripple our organisation. It would absolutely ruin our organisation. And so for us, it's getting it right, asking the questions. So whether you want to employ people with convictions or not, it's really important that you're asking the questions correctly. You've got the recruitment and the retention piece. So this bit, legal and compliance, is about just not getting it wrong. But now let's talk about getting it right. Let's talk about benefiting as a business. Timson sees a 74% retention rate of their people with criminal convictions. That's 11% higher than their industry average. That's huge in terms of savings. It costs around £6,000 to hire someone. This is what the CIPD say, around £6,000 to employ someone. Getting that wrong, having to rehire, costs loads for companies. So for us, that's huge. And 1 in 4 adults of working age has a conviction. That means 1 in 4 of applicants looking at your roles are wondering, how will you treat their data? What will disclosure look like to you? And how will you make a decision based on their criminal past? It's something for you to consider as an employer. Are you missing talent? Are people opting out because they don't know how you're going to handle the criminal record disclosure process? And finally, right at the top, we've got social impact and business development. There is a huge movement in government around PPN 002, where they are commissioning based on social value and social impact. As businesses, you will see this trickle through local authorities and through your clients as you are in their supply chain, probably to a government or a local authority. We're seeing a lot more there around demonstrating social value, and employing people with criminal convictions is one of the greatest savings to society, worth around £55,922 in social value under what's called the TOMS framework. But 92% of employers said that inclusive hiring, inclusive recruitment does help them win more contracts. And there's already employers doing this. You are not the first organization to do this. There are some great employers out there doing this. Today, I want to run through our 7-step ICEBERG methodology on how you can consistently, safely, and fairly employ people with criminal convictions. And I just want to say right at the top, it's not about hiring people with criminal convictions. It's about employing them. And what's the difference there? Hiring is a process where we say, let's go and find people, let's welcome those with convictions, let's bring them into our service, let's know what we're going to do when an applicant discloses a criminal conviction. Employing is that you already employ people and they may have a historic or they might get a new criminal conviction. Your processes want to mirror each other. You want to treat them both the same. What would you do right now if your employee of the year was arrested by the police? These are things that we need to consider, and we'll get into that in compliant policies and procedures. I know, it sounds riveting. This is our 7-step ICEBERG methodology. We say the iceberg because employing people with convictions is just the tip of the iceberg. That's that guy climbing up there. I'm sure he's someone with a criminal conviction. It's a saying that stuck with us, and then I stupidly tried to make an analogy of it and really forced the point, especially when you start to get to E. So you see it spells the word iceberg. See what we've done there? See what we've done there? But the E, I'm really pushing it with empathetic interviews, disclosure and vetting. Bit of a mouthful, but we needed an E and we found an E. So, hey, iceberg. Remember iceberg when it comes to employing people with convictions. Hopefully it doesn't end up like the Titanic, your program. Let's see. Now, in the chat, I'm going to be throwing in a link so you can assess where you're at when it comes to employing people with convictions. And so that you, bear with me, where is it? Is it that one? Yeah. So I've popped that in the chat, and I'm going to pop it on LinkedIn as well for our friends over there, wherever you are. Oh, getting used to all this. There you go, LinkedIn. Popped it in the chat for you as well. Oh no, can I edit that? This is so cool. I'm getting so used to LinkedIn now. Right, do that. Pop it there. I don't know where that goes. I don't know where that one goes, and I don't know where that one goes. Good luck. This is to work out how much employing people with convictions would be worth to you and your organisation. So whilst I'm rambling through for the rest of today's event, feel free to answer some 15, I think, yes or no questions, click box exercises, check a box, and it will give you some idea on where you're at around your legal and compliance, your social impact and business development, or your recruitment and retention. I am mirrored, so I'm figuring out where I am. These ones. And you'll get a chart, a dartboard like this that will help you understand, okay, we could improve there a bit. It'll give you some advice, and it'll give you the opportunity to book in a free call with me to get some specific one-to-one advice and guidance. Make the most of it. I am here to ramble and support as many people as possible to employ people with convictions, people like us here at Offploy. So let's talk about creating an inclusive culture, the I in iceberg. This is where we're going to feature an organisation called Catch-22. They're an absolutely incredible organisation. Just a little bit about Catch-22. They've got schools, prisons, community interventions, over 1,000 colleagues and volunteers across the UK. They've taken this from a niche side project of let's employ some people with convictions over there to let's roll it out throughout the organisation. They've engaged stakeholders early on. They've empowered colleagues with lived experience to tell their stories. They've surveyed colleagues. They've created safe lines of communication, and they've supported people with and without convictions to come forward and ask the tough questions. And I think that's really powerful and important. Obviously, they've done that in partnership with Offploy, which I could not be more grateful and excited about. Let's talk about an inclusive culture. I always see an inclusive culture like a tug of war with the flag in the middle. But instead of just one rope that two teams are pulling, a culture is multiple ropes all tied around each other, a big knot in the middle that many teams are pulling. And the more senior someone is, the more weight they've got to pull with. The bigger the teams are, the more they can pull. That creates culture. Culture is represented by all these people pulling in different directions, and it's kind of what lands in the middle. It's what we accept. It's really hard to prune. It's really hard to curate, but it happens. And it happens with lots of people all pulling in different directions. The bigger your organization, the more ambiguous your culture is, the harder it is to change. But you can influence it in certain ways, for example, starting with the bigger teams or starting with the more senior people because they have more sway in changing and pulling the culture. So there's things that you can do as an organization to really influence that culture. For us, it's about defining what a person with a conviction looks like. I go back to that slide about the guy with the knuckles and the angry guy. If that's what people think a person with a conviction looks like, you're already fighting an uphill battle. But if we recognize it as it could be anyone, it could be anyone that walks among the streets, that sits on the bus next to us, that comes into our shops, 1 in 4 adults of working age. In fact, I probably know a naughty nephew or someone that's done something with a conviction. I probably know these people. That's what we need to start with. We need to get the conversation so that everyone knows what we're talking about here. We're not just talking about the serious, violent ex-prisoners and all this side of it. We're talking about 1 in 4 adults in society, all walks of life. And turning up with a clear strategy to say, here's where we need to worry about with legal and compliance, recruitment and retention, social impact and business development, by doing that score app that I've put in the chat for you, by doing that assessment, having something that says, we can improve what we do here, we can benefit as a business by doing this here. That's a great way to start a strategy on why we're doing this. Building some internal communications with champions. Guess what? If you're watching this today, you are our champion. I will do whatever it takes to support you in the office or at home, wherever you are today. I will do whatever it takes to support you, to support your business to employ people with convictions. You are our champion, and I want to ensure you've got all the tools, resources, confidence, and skills necessary to start a conversation around employing people with convictions. You'll want to create a safe space for those with and without convictions to talk. And you might want to bring your clients and suppliers on the journey as well. They might even be pushing for it, wanting it to happen. So who knows? We've got many people in the Ministry of Justice supply chain that are now having us work with their suppliers to bring them on board with the journey to help them all achieve their outcomes that are commanded by the end client at the top. But the impact's phenomenal what that's going to do. Now, after each of the 7 sections, inclusive culture, I'm going to throw in the chat a link to our toolkit. I'm not going to throw it in the chat actually every time, but I've got a link to our toolkit. And at the end of each of the 7 sections, I'll tell you what resources are quickly available in that toolkit. So you can sign up to the toolkit and get access now to the Score app if you've not done it already. We've got some awareness training videos on what it means to be someone with a conviction. We'll also help you do a business case. So jump into the toolkit, find all the free resources that are there for you to use and make the most of. That should be in the chat now for you to use. Amazing. Let's go on to compliant policies and practices. What we've got here is an amazing organization called Westech. And before I get into Westech, let me tell you about Westech. They've created incredible policies around employing people with criminal convictions. They're owned by a global, an overseas organization, and they celebrated them for their policies and the work they've done. They said, how are we going to do it as an organization? And they solidified it into a compliant criminal records policy. They understood how they're going to deal with spent and unspent convictions, where they'll ask the question, what they do, all documented in a 2-3 page document. Essentially, you have one. Only 16% of organizations have one. Picture it this way. Imagine one of your revenue streams, one of your target audiences, equated to 25% of your revenue. 25%. Now, if you've got that level of revenue coming from one source, you would have colleague training, you would have documents, you would understand what an onboarding looks like for every client. You would have everything neatly wrapped up into processes and practices. You would have materials, you'd have content ready, you'd have a dedicated web page, you'd have it all. CIPD says it costs around £6,125 for every hire, including the finding the person, the training, the onboarding, the time spent learning. All of these things cost around £6,000. If 1 in 4 adults, 25%, looking at your roles have a criminal record, what does your website, what does your organization say to them? Do you ask the question, do you not? When you ask the question, what questions do you ask? How do you use the data? Where do you store the data? Who do you tell about it? When do you destroy or return the data? What does your website tell people with convictions about applying for the roles? What do your existing colleagues know about you employing people with convictions? What do your existing colleagues know around what they do if they get arrested, charged, sentenced with a criminal offence? What do they do next? How will you treat them? What decisions will you make? What considerations will you make? This can be publicly available information, or at least widely distributed internally in a single criminal records policy. And you need one to be compliant with the Information Commissioner's Office if you're asking questions around criminal convictions or if you're processing DBS checks. So get yourself a a criminal records policy. And yes, we do have a template available for you just after this section. This is all around handling early and over disclosure when people tell you too much information, what existing colleagues should do, having a central knowledge hub, gathering data and destroying and returning it at the right time, training your internal team and building it all into one dedicated policy. If you go over to the toolkit on the link that I've just shared in the chat and online, the Employers Toolkit, you'll find access to a policy template. That's there for you to use and make the most of. It's an uneditable Word document, so save a copy and then you can edit it and use it as you need, just so you don't go around ruining our main template, obviously. But that's there for you to use and make the most of. We've just saved you thousands in fines. Thank you. But make the most of it. Let's talk about equitable risk management. So as an employer, we're at E now. We're at E of the iceberg. This is around how do we manage the risk of employing people with convictions in our organisation. I'm going to talk a little bit about Transport for Wales now and how they do it. But let me just have a drink of my water, sponsored by Offploy. Offploy water bottle. We don't even make these anymore. They're exclusive. I was going to say if you want to buy one, they're £1,000, but that would be great for our organisation. Let me know if you're willing to pay £1,000 for a Offploy water bottle. So, equitable risk management. Let's picture you have a construction company. Now, construction companies build things. Construction companies work on sites, and there's objects at height. There's splinters and wood splinters, metal splinters. There's uneven ground. There's all sorts to think about. And if a construction company wants to be safe on site, they'd say, right, you need a hard hat, goggles, high-vis vest, gloves, all of this. They would mitigate and manage risk of harm, not just by people who are clumsy, but by everyone, by telling them to wear this PPE equipment. We know that, right? We know that. Now, that same construction company wouldn't then say, well, because we have construction sites over there, everyone in our organisation needs to wear PPE equipment. They wouldn't have a blanket approach to health and safety. Can you imagine Janet in your accounting team? Janet, you know, she sends you you're missing these expenses. You owe us these. Bloody hell, again, getting another about my missing receipt. It was a train ticket, Janet. It was £1.60. I mean, train tickets are not £1.60 anymore, are they? But picture that. And picture poor little Janet has got a big gloves on, goggles, hard hat, high-vis vest, all this stuff, to work in an office, not on a site, to do the accounts. I mean, yeah, you'd probably get some reprieve that she wouldn't have to, she wouldn't be able to email you as quick about all the receipts that you owe. But at the same time, it probably wouldn't be, it's disproportionate, isn't it? It's an over protection. And this is the approach that companies take when they do a blanket ban on one, people with convictions, or two, offence categories. When they say, we will not work with murderers, terrorists, arsonists, sex offenders, whatever it might be, and they do blanket bans, they're missing out on so much potential talent. And we know that convictions have circumstances and characters behind them. There could be a sexual offence, for example, where two 17-year-olds consenting shared their personal images of each other, and that then becomes a distributing child pornography sexual offence. It can become that. And yet again, we look at people like Hugh Grant, wonderful actor. I'd probably hire Hugh Grant. I'm making sure it's the right one. Yes, it is the right one. Hugh Grant, not Hugh Laurie. Hugh Grant. Lewd conduct in the States. I think it was something to do with soliciting a sex worker, but who knows? Sexual offence. And when we hear these blanket bans and blanket approaches, we essentially cut out potential talent. We lose the opportunity to understand the character and the circumstance behind someone, behind the conviction, before then just looking at the conviction. And when blanket bans are applied, it really just put it into perspective. When you think about a finance department, let's go back to Janet in the finance team. How much does, for example, you look at the risk of the role and you say, right, Janet works in finance. If Janet has a conviction, we can't hire her because she's working with money. Well, let's hold our horses for a second there. Because what if that conviction was a driving related offence? You'd say, oh, actually, probably, yeah, I probably would hire her in that situation. That's not bad. What if it was a possession of a class B or C drugs offence 20 years ago? She's an incredible accountant and bookkeeper. She made a mistake when she was, younger. What if that was there? Oh, yeah, probably would hire Janet in that situation. Okay, now if it was a fraud offence, you might say, let's not push our luck, we won't hire her in that role. But I do also want to challenge that, Because your risk management in your organization, your risk management is not about risk managing the people with the convictions, not yet. That comes at interviews, disclosure, and vetting. It's about managing the risk that anyone in that role has the potential to cause harm. And when we look at the potential to cause harm, we need to look at, well, what potential could they cause harm in the role? What potential could anyone damage our assets in this role? What potential could anyone damage our reputation in this role? And what potential could anyone mismanage, lose, destroy, steal data in this role? Now, as an organization, if you're managing finances and people have the ability, anyone has the ability to steal your money, your processes probably aren't strong enough. We're a small voluntary sector organisation, and even we know that you don't give sole authority to one person to distribute funds, that the bookkeeper is different to the accounts payable, that there is processes and approvals depending on values in place, and that receipts are reconciled weekly so that you've got clear access of your data. Whether you employ someone with a fraud conviction or not, starts to challenge, well, what are your processes to prevent anyone from causing harm, regardless of the person and their conviction? Plus, when you're looking at the person with the conviction, who's likely to get the finger pointed at them first when something goes wrong? Exactly. We have an amazing client called Transport for Wales, and they've really built out their role risk matrix. They've really looked at all their roles, driver roles, customer-facing roles, cleaning roles, whatever it might be, and they've put them through the hard framework to consider, well, as an organisation, do some roles have greater reputational risk than others? The person standing on the platform, for example. Does some have a risk of causing harm versus others? Maybe the driver, for example. Are there any roles that we have less tolerance to certain convictions? Of course they do. Of course they do. Organisations like this, for example, couldn't be seen to be employing someone who's been convicted under the Terrorism Act. It's understandable. So it's just about having that approach as an organisation to say, let's look at the role first, the risk of the role, then the risk of the individual. Now, if you want a role risk matrix or a risk management framework, you can get a copy of that in our Employers Toolkit online, inside the toolkit that I've shared with you already. So sign up to the toolkit, get access to all those templates, tools, and resources. They're here for you. We give this away for free. We love what we do. We want you to have an amazing time as an employer in employing people with convictions. We want you to have the skills and tools necessary to employ people like us. So make the most of it. Last bit of coffee, excuse me. Whew. Let's talk about broad talent attraction. This is how do we employ people with criminal convictions. I'm going to feature Serco, an amazing organisation doing great stuff in this place. They've even just hired in the first quarter, having worked with Offploy through their Pathways programme, through their programme of inclusive social inclusion. They have gone and employed 89 socially excluded people in the first quarter of this calendar year. Absolutely phenomenal. Can you imagine what they've probably saved on agency fees, recruitment fees, all these bits that they've saved by having inclusive approaches, policies, web pages, whatever they need to attract that talent. I'm super impressed and super excited to tell you more about that in a minute. I was on a podcast the other week, and the guy said to me, he was like, Jacob, if I want to employ people with criminal convictions, where do I start? Where do you all hang out? I was like, well, we hang out down at the local criminal conviction, the ex-cons community centre, where it looks like a prison. We have some pints, watch some TV. You know, it's all quite fun. We get back in our old prison suits and we just have a great time having a chat and a hang around. Obviously, we don't. They're 1 in 4 adults of working age. There's some people in prison I never want to associate with again. I'll tell you that much. There's others, friends for life. Others that actually work with us and have been part of Offploy for many years. So super excited about that. But we don't sit and hang around in a person with a conviction or an ex-offender's community centre or anything like that. We are represented by 1 in 4 adults of working age. So for us, you're talking about people already looking at your roles. The best way to attract talent for people with convictions is to stop turning them off before they even apply for your role, because they're going to assume you're going to reject them anyway. So how do we make your organisation proactive, positive, encouraging of people with convictions to apply for your roles? And I think it goes in 3 stages. I know it goes in 3 stages. Many organisations think employing people with convictions employ prisoners, and therefore they go straight to prisons. I don't know if this represents any of you here. They'll go to the The prison employment leads or the New Futures Network, they'll go to their local prison, they'll have a walk around, it'll be lovely, it'll be really nice, they'll bring the execs on board, it'll be great, and they'll go, let's employ some people on ROTL, release on temporary license, day release, let's employ some people on ROTL. And they start at the hardest part first, whilst they've got 1 in 4 adults looking at their roles already, unsure whether they would get an opportunity. They're already in the community, they're good to go, they're looking for a job, they might already be employed and just want to come and work for you because you've got a better place of work, all this stuff. And most employers start at the hardest bit first, in my opinion, which is starting in the prisons with the prisons. And I think that's the end game. I think that's something that by the time you get to that, you want to be doing it on repeat. Your team want to be brought on board with it. Because in the prisons, you'll get 1s, 2s, 3s, 5s, 10s of recruits over the space of a year, and how you find it all, and they'll be released from a prison, come out to work for you in the daytime, go back to prison at the night time, and then if you're fortunate, if you're lucky, they'll be released to your local area. They'll be the same person mentally that when they were in prison as when they're released, and they'll start work with you. For me, it's a complicated process. It takes a bit more effort and work. There's some amazing specialist organisations out there, including the New Futures Network, who will help you do that. I'm just saying that most organisations start there, when I would start getting your own house in order first. So the 3 levels in order would be to get your own house in order first for the 1 in 4 people already looking at and applying to your roles. Then go to community-based recruitment. The New Futures Network, voluntary sector organisations, charities will find and appoint people to your roles. If you give them some cash, which would be lovely, not the New Futures Network, they're government funded, but the voluntary sector organisations, as you would a recruitment agency, they'll give you so much value for money. They'll provide wraparound support for you, the individual. They'll support them for 6 to 12 months. They'll give you a highly retainable candidate ultimately. And that's what I want to see more of. So the level 1 is get your own house in order first. I'll tell you more about that in a second. Level 2 is recruit from the community-based organisations, getting them to refer people into your roles and service. And level 3 is to go to the prisons and start recruiting from there. Remember, only 1 in 10 of those sentenced go to prison. The majority of the 13 million people with criminal records are in the community. Only 80,000 are in prison. Only 300,000 are on probation. The rest, 380,000, essentially 12 point something million, are out there in the community, looking at your roles already, wondering how will you employ them as someone with a conviction. And the organisations that are doing it really well are absolutely taking the cream from the crop. They're benefiting from all the talent, people who says, I know I can get a job there, I'm going to apply there and work really well and prove that I can be part of something. They stick around for longer. They're incredibly determined. You'll see it. You'll see the statements from the employers, how much they benefit from employing people with criminal convictions. But getting your own house in order first is the way to do it. And that might be what you say on your website. It might be offering a guaranteed interview scheme, exactly like Serco have done. Serco have put together a page on their website that says, hey, applying for us with a criminal record, here's what to expect. Here's the vetting, the restrictions, here's the extra support you need. You can declare to us that you have a conviction before the interview, and that will guarantee you an interview. And then they give people all sorts of information on what to expect. It's an incredible way of doing it. And then they're now plugging in the level 2 community partners to refer into their already set up structure. How good is that? Like, they're benefiting from that over and over and over again, just by getting their own house in order first. And I really want you to do that. And the best place to start is get an ex-offender policy in place, a criminal records policy. And then second, have that policy reflected on a web page so that you publicly declare, here's our approach to employing people with convictions for our colleagues, for our applicants. Here's what to expect. Here's where you can apply. Benefit from that talent. Maybe even consider putting a small statement on your job advert that says, our organisation actively encourages people with convictions to apply for our roles. We've got a dedicated job advert statement for you and some careers page examples in the toolkit, so please do go ahead and make the most of those. Woo! We're at the E. We're at the big E now, the empathetic interviews, disclosure and vetting. And I just need some more water sponsored by Offploy. Oh. Empathetic interviews, disclosure and vetting. This is all around. You've done your role risk, you've assessed, you've looked at the risk of the role. Now it's time to look at the risk of the individual. Let's say We've got a great culture. We've got our policies and processes. We're managing our risk of our roles. We know which roles are higher risk and lower, where we've got less tolerance for people with like certain convictions, and we've got other roles where we don't even ask about convictions at all. We're now going to attract that talent. We're going to plug into community resources. We're going to get our own house in order first. We're going to go to the prisons. We're doing all this with talent attraction. Now you need to interview someone. Now it's time to interview them. And this is about empathetic interviews, disclosure, and vetting. When did you last sign up to a phone bill or an electricity bill or something like that? I mean, you will have been asked hundreds of strange questions, right? About like, wow, the people will need your address, they'll want your card details, they might want to know your credit score, they want all sorts of personal information. And then they give you a 32-page contract that you sign, and you don't really have any idea of what you're signing to or how they're going to use your data. Is that right? Is that how you feel when you think about the last experience you've had with an electricity provider or with a telephone provider or whatever it might be? Now picture the same situation, and you've signed your terms, and God knows who they're selling your data to and all that stuff. You signed your terms. And now picture, instead of it being an electricity bill or a phone bill or something like that, it's the difference between you and your income. It's the difference between you and having a job, having that day-to-day purpose in life, providing for your kids, getting your kids back maybe by proving that you've got stable accommodation. It can really matter. It could really mean something. It could really mean something to you. And now picture, instead of just between you and a job, you're having to talk about the most shameful part of your life. And you have no idea why you're being asked the questions, how the information is going to be used, and who's going to be told whether you get rejected or not. Who's going to be told about this deeply personal and shameful information about a conviction. If I tell you about my drugs conviction, I have to talk to you about, I have to set the scene. I can't just give you the one-liner that I might be given on your application form, possession with intent to supply Class A and B drugs to persons unknown. I want the opportunity to be able to give context behind it, to say, I was at university, I was struggling horrendously with debt, mental health challenges. I don't use it as an excuse. I just want you to know where I was in my life. And I got a prison sentence, and that was deeply challenging, traumatic at times. And I served this punishment, but from this punishment, I attended these courses, these programs. I was able to get a job here, and here. I was able to start. And I now want to work for you because I believe you're the next stepping stone in my life to be able to. That's so much information. So much information. It's a lot more than you get from most applicants applying to your roles, and certainly one of the most interesting interviews you'll do if you ask the right questions and keep it all above board. But can you imagine how challenging that is for someone to tell you that information and you're not prepared? You don't know what you're going to do with that data. They don't know what you're going to do with that data. And they're worried you're going to go and tell, one, their colleagues when they start, or two, just a line manager that doesn't need to know. And there's a real story of someone who started work and someone Googled them. And when they Googled them, they then printed out the article and stuck it on their locker, like real shameful stuff like that. The employer in that situation did the wrong thing and ultimately dismissed the individual with the conviction because they didn't have a plan, a process, an approach. And you know, I regret we weren't involved in that case at all, but just to hear these things, these examples, what culture do you want as an organisation? It starts with your policy, but it also then goes on to how you ask the questions, why you ask them, where you ask them, when you ask them, and what you do with that data. The biggest thing I can say is preparing for an interview, preparing for someone to disclose their conviction to you. Understand when someone should disclose, if you need to know at all. But two, have colleagues who know about disclosure. Make sure people going in with a hiring manager's toolkit around disclosing convictions. Thank people after they've disclosed to you. They've probably just disclosed something deeply sensitive, deeply personal, deeply shameful. And they want to be honest. They want to be seen to be honest. It's a typical profile of someone with a conviction moving forward in life. They overshare. Be the first person to thank them for their honesty. Thank them for sharing something that must have been difficult and that you really appreciate it. And if you know, let them know what the next steps are. Let them know who will use that information, how you use that information. If you've got a policy, it all stems from that. It should be there. It should be something that you have. And this isn't about for when people start applying for your roles. Remember, people are already applying for your roles with convictions. And when you and how you ask the question really does matter. If I could encourage you, I'd say if you're only offering people one small line on the application form to talk about their offence, death by dangerous driving or possession of Class B and C drugs, that one line to talk about the most shameful part of their life, consider scrapping that and moving it to, we'll happily receive a disclosure statement, disclosure letter from you further in the process, or we only ask after the offer stage, something like that. Consider doing it that way. It's much more ethical, it's much more empathetic for your interviews, disclosure and vetting. But I also want you to look after your colleagues. Your team will be hearing about disclosures. They'll hear a disclosure from someone and it might shake someone. Ensure your colleagues who are receiving the disclosures have the space, policies, processes, more processes to pick up a phone to you or to a wellbeing program to say, hey, I've just heard about this offence, found it really difficult to hear, I need to offload to someone. Your colleagues are probably not trained psychologists or psychotherapists, so I think it's worth just for those challenging offences, for anyone and that could be anything. It could be violence against an animal to a burglary to a sexual offence. It could be everyone has different things going on in their life. Any offence could prompt and trigger the colleague who's listening to the disclosure that you might want to ensure that they've got somewhere to offload to afterwards. It might be you. It could be a service like Offploy would be here and happy to support with that. So consider that. I'm really excited to tell you about how Sunbelt Rentals, as an organisation, they've really looked at their interview processes. They've gone in and considered people with convictions that they probably wouldn't have considered previous to working with us. And ultimately, what I want to say is that it's seen people who would have been rejected automatically go on to employment and become stellar example colleagues. And this organisation really is leading the way from a HR and a social value perspective. Incredible client of ours doing great stuff, and they've started a program called Forests with Impact. They've invested and supported it, which supports organisations to buy trees that have been grown and planted by prisoners. They're doing thousands of trees now. It's absolutely phenomenal. Now, in our toolkit, following this section around the empathetic interviews, disclosure and vetting, yes, we have interview scoring templates. Yes, we have rejection templates. When you do have to reject someone, you do it well and you ensure that people know that, hey, we're rejecting you because your conviction is deemed too high risk for this role. Come back when it's spent. Consider these are the roles in our organisation, or here are some support services that you can access with your conviction. So make sure that even a rejection is an incredible experience for people with convictions. But one thing I really want to point you to, and I'm going to throw it in the chat and on the LinkedIn now, is our disclosure toolkit. This is what I spent all of our last year's profits on. My team absolutely love me and are so grateful for me for doing that. Where is it? I've got a button there. Yay! Right, so I'm going to share with you the calculator, but it's a full page toolkit that you can use. The disclosure toolkit helps individuals work out when their offence is spent and whether they need to disclose that conviction. Now, why is that good for you as an employer? If you only can do a basic level DBS check, you only want to be knowing about convictions that are still live, I want to say, which is a certain amount of time after the sentence that you have to disclose when asked. But for most convictions, that time expires. And what that means is people who have a legal responsibility to tell you the truth when asked about a conviction, they over-disclose. They tell you, the employer, too much information. They tell you about a conviction that you would not be able to see on a basic DBS check. Now, if you do standard or enhanced checks, it's a different matter. Message me, I'll talk to you about that later. But most employers conduct most roles that are only eligible for a basic DBS check. And you can basic DBS check any role. That means you only can know about unspent convictions where the amount of time that's passed is not sufficient, that people must still disclose when asked. The individual is incentivized to tell you too much. Why is that bad for you as an employer, though? Let's have a think. First of all, you're making decisions on information that is not relevant to you. Second of all, you're storing data that is not relevant to you. You are processing criminal records data that is not relevant to you as an employer. So I'm sorry to put this on you, but whether you want to employ people with convictions or not, 100% of your disclosures need to go through the disclosure calculator. Because you need to work out, do I need to record this information or do I need to tear it up and throw it away immediately because we have no right to hold it? What does that mean? ICO fines, etc., because you're storing criminal records data that is spent. The individual, if they get it wrong, they get further convictions. So they're incentivized to over-disclose. For you as an employer, if you get it wrong, you get fines. But that means you don't want over-disclosures. You want only the data you need. Employers don't know this stuff. It's really important. So be sure to use the calculator every time someone discloses a conviction to you so that you know whether you need to record it or not. Ooh, that conviction's spent. We don't need to hear about that. So I'm going to scratch it from my memory. Not going to make any notes on it. You can carry on as normal as though you're a candidate without a conviction. Let's quickly talk about reasonable onboarding, and then we'll go on to impact reporting, generating and celebrating impact. So whether we're opening a local McDonald's store every morning and the 18-year-old that can do that, right through to launching rocket ships and the Serenis program. Not Serenis, what's it called? Artemis program. Let's say we're launching, we have checklists in life. When we're onboarding colleagues where compliance really matters, for example, right to work and reference checks, we have checklists. So why don't we have checklists for people with convictions or even any socially excluded group? A conviction is not a protected characteristic, but we should consider checklists for all socially excluded groups to ensure that we've onboarded them correctly, that we've adjusted for any reasonable adjustments needed. You do not have to make reasonable adjustments for people with convictions because it's not a protected characteristic, but I reckon you would make reasonable adjustments for any of your colleagues because you want to keep them and you want to bring people on board. What does a person with a conviction need that someone with a conviction doesn't need? I'm going to tell you nothing. 1 in 4 adults are working age. They might have mental health challenges. They might have previous drugs challenges. They might have previously faced homelessness. So might have any other of the people applying for your role. What people with convictions differ is that they might have an ankle tag. They might have restrictions. They might have probation appointments to attend. All can be flexible, maybe not the restrictions, but all can be managed. But you can't manage what you don't know about. So this is about asking the right questions, understanding if someone has to be home by a certain time, if someone has probation appointments at a certain time every week, if someone cannot work with technology, with certain groups, or in certain areas. These are all things worth knowing as an employer. And this is something, an amazing organisation, Balfour Beatty. They employed someone from a prison, and they looked at different ways. And he essentially influenced their entire onboarding experience. And he has progressed now from where he was, kind of working from the prison on day release, right through to now being celebrated publicly and nationally through being an assistant project leader. He's doing some incredible stuff, and it's lovely to see that you can change the onboarding experience. You can figure out what an individual needs, you can look at it, and then you can replicate that across all your people with convictions. Learn from your experiences, learn from us with the template that we've put together, but then change that template, build it around you, your organization, your experiences. There's a copy of that template over there for you to use in the toolkit. That's there for you to use. Have I realized I did share the card? So that template's there to use in the checklist. In the toolkit. Make the most of it. Oh, we're on the G of the iceberg. It's all about generating and celebrating impact now. So you're doing a great job. How do you actually use this to celebrate what you do? Well, one thing I want to say is, as an employer, you are nothing special, in a beautiful way that there are employers out there already doing this. You would not be the first employer to employ people with criminal convictions. However, you, as the individual back home, to our colleagues tuning in live online, you might be the first person in your organization to lead the charge. You might be the first person in your organization to say, we should be doing this. You might have to come up with all sorts of answers, all sorts of questions. And I want to say, we're here with you to generate and celebrate that impact. Because once you do get it right, you'll be using this to prove to your HR team that they've reduced agency spend, increased retention, they've got a more productive and output workforce. You'll be using it with your business development team to show that they're winning more bids and applying for more bids based on around that they're employing people with convictions. Because there are employers doing this out there, and there's some doing it really well, but it's a select group of people who are doing it exceptionally well. It doesn't take a lot to rise to the top. You could be one of the best employers in the UK around employing 25% of the UK's working age population. It's a pretty big statement, and I think that's something worth celebrating. You know about building an inclusive culture, and you might want to say, well, how do we start to tell the stories of people? You don't just tell a person's story with a conviction. You don't just whack their face online and go, hey, we've just employed this person who's doing amazingly well after 12 months, because that individual, their conviction never becomes spent then, because you're perpetuating their conviction by keeping it online. So there's ways of handling case studies and stories, doing it sensitively and doing it in a way that can be celebrated throughout your organization without outing or building your entire success around one person. And for us, it's not just about proving what you do with your impact figures and measurements, it's about improving it too. If you're interested in how to measure your social impact and social value, you can look at Offploy's social impact report. On the slides, you can click this image and you'll get access to our social impact report and how we've generated over £12 million in 2024, more this year, around employing people with criminal convictions, and how we've done that for society. We've saved society, the NHS, the fire service, the police, the prisons, whatever it might be, saved them millions a year with accredited data and numbers, because we have supported and employed people with criminal convictions, and you can do that too. And that's just super, super exciting for us that there's a strong business case for doing that. What I'd really like to say to you and leave you with is that as an employer, if you want to get started in employing people with criminal convictions, the first thing to do is to get current, compliant and confident. Ensure that you know exactly what you currently do and how you do it. This is where we do a 120-point assessment with you. I'll talk you through that in a bit. I'll take you through the gift shop shortly. But then you want to build a board-ready business case, a business case that helps you understand what are the business benefits to our organization, not generally. What would our retention be? What would our savings be as an organization by proactively employing people with criminal convictions? You then create a roadmap that says, here's our current reality, here's our business case, and here's the gap in between to say, here's the steps we need to take to get to that business case, to ensure that the business case is happening day in, day out, that we are proactively employing people with convictions and benefiting ourselves in the tens and hundreds of thousands and society in the millions to get to that strong business case. And then you want to bring it all together in a stakeholder buy-in workshop. This is where your execs, your hiring managers, whoever it might be, get together. You bring someone like me in with lived experience, or one of my colleagues. We share a bit about our story, then share a bit about the practicalities, looking at your business case that you've already built, celebrating where that could be and what could be done. And you really convince people to sign off to say, brilliant, we've got a business case, a strategy, we know where our gaps are, and we know what lived experience actually means now. Let's crack on as an organization and turn this from a side project to business as usual. We support employers, and if you are interested in our service, many employers start off at our launchpad to understand where the gaps are in their service. That's the current, compliant, confident, the business case, the strategy, and the workshop, all delivered for you, with you in there. We cover it all in the space of a few weeks. But then many employers actually do our launchpad and accelerator, because from the business case, from the impact strategy, there's 20 to 30 actions that you'll want to do, from updating your policies, getting your website right, doing all this. And we can do that with and for you. So we support you with consulting, with training, running workshops for your teams, and ensuring your hiring managers are really bought in, removing that unconscious bias. And then we provide a support line, advice and guidance service for all your colleagues to really benefit and make the most of the fact that you're employing people with convictions, answering those awkward and scary and nervous questions that they might have to ask your HR team. They can instead ask the professionals in a confidential way and manner. So most organizations start at the launchpad and accelerator phase. We've got all sorts of links and slides for you available. And this is the end of today's webinar. Goodness me, we made it. We made it to the end. I would love to know, do we have any questions in chat or online? Do we have any questions? Where are you at as an organization when it comes to employing people with criminal convictions? I'm going to launch one poll for our online audience, our Zoom audience. Let me launch that poll and that one. And let's launch another one, employers post-webinar confidence. Let's see how we get on with that. I just want to thank you all for being a part of this. It's absolutely huge. I really appreciate the time you invest in being a part of the events like these, and really excited that you want to go on to support people with criminal convictions. So if there are any questions in the LinkedIn, please pop them in the comments, and I'll get through to them probably after today's show, after today's event. And I'm thinking of just streaming these events live every week, because I think we'll catch people. I mean, it's nice to see how many viewers we've had online on LinkedIn throughout the event. So super exciting. Should we call it quits? Can I take a breather? Get some more music going. Amazing. Look after yourselves. Have an amazing day. Thank you for watching. And anything you need to get started employing people with convictions, Offploy is here. Send me a message. Thanks.